Hey folks, what's going on? It's the TurtleDork back again with another review. This time I have a review of the Marvel Netflix show Luke Cage. Now, I know what you're saying to yourself, B, Luke Cage has been out for like 2 months now, so why review now? Well, the thing is, I kind of wanted to take my time to kind of do this review. It's a show that I really enjoyed, at least partly. We'll get into that a little later. But I definitely want to do a review, so hopefully if you've seen the show, of course you can watch it at your own leisure. You can binge it, or you can kind of take your time. So if you're still kind of watching it, and once you get through, you can come back and watch this review. Or if you've already binged it, go ahead and listen to my thoughts and let me know if you like what I have to say, or if you disagree. Let me know in the comments. Anyway, let's get to it. Luke Cage. So let's kind of start with the overall main cast. So let's start with Mike Colter as Luke Cage. I've really enjoyed his performance throughout this series. He has a very quiet nature about him, and that's you really see that in the first episode of the show, especially that whole sequence that kind of takes place in the barbershop. I like how this first episode kind of takes its time developing, and you really get to spend time with these characters, and you see that also in this in that opening scene in the barbershop. His presence on screen is undeniable. He's very soft-spoken. He has a very good nature about him, but there's a quiet strength about him, and that permeates throughout the show. It's great to see him in this role. We talk about a lot of the casting in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, how a lot of these actors fit the characters, like a la Chris Hemsworth as Thor. Like, we really can't see anybody else as that character. I really feel, in my personal opinion, that Mike Colter really embodies the character of Luke Cage, and it's kind of hard, even at this point, to see anybody else playing that character but him. I also like, as we get further into the series, we get to learn a little bit more about his character. Specifically, I believe it's episode 4, when we get the flashback to how when he was in prison and how he got his powers, and we also get a nice little nod at the comic book version of the Luke Cage character, and like the yellow top with the metal headband. So I think that was a nice little nod to the comic book fans. But overall, I thought Mike Colter was great portraying the character of Luke Cage. Another character that was really important throughout the course of this series was the character of Pop. Pop from the barbershop. A nice little line from Biggie's Warning, played by Frankie Faison. He was only in 2 episodes. Spoiler alert, he got killed, but his death plays throughout the series, and so in turn it makes him a very important character, a very important character to Luke Cage. And in that first episode, we get to see the relationship established between Pop and Luke Cage, and not only with Luke Cage, but the relationship that Pop has with everybody in the neighborhood. He's a very important figure in that community, and a lot of people respect him and look up to him. The next character that we have is Misty Knight, played by Simone Missick. She's a really great character, a very strong, no nonsense type of character, but she doesn't overplay it, and I kind of like that. She's also similar to Pop. She's from the neighborhood, and she has a very established reputation in Harlem, and which gives her motivation to kind of want to clean up the city. And as we kind of go throughout the series, we see the relationship between Misty Knight and Luke Cage, and how that kind of develops. Not necessarily a romantic relationship, but how at certain times they're at odds with each other, and how they have to kind of come together and try to work together to really kind of, for the betterment of Harlem, and to really kind of clean up this city. Another character that we have is Shades, played by Theo Rossi. He kind of surprised me. I didn't expect much from this character, but as we kind of progress throughout the series, his role and his arc changes. He's kind of like the right-hand man to the arms dealer known as Diamondback. Something interesting about his character, there's a quiet intensity about Shades that really plays into his villainy. He always has the sunglasses on, but even when he takes them off, there's something there's something behind that you just really don't know how dangerous or how conniving he can be. And we do find that out about halfway through the season as his role kind of changes. But I like the way he plays it in the beginning of that series, because you're trying to figure him out. Next we have Miss Alfre Woodard, the great Alfre Woodard, as Mariah Dillard. She plays a councilwoman in Harlem, and she has good intentions for the city, but as we learn, like, her cousin is Cottonmouth, who we'll get into his character a little bit later, but he's a gangster, kind of drug kingpin of Harlem. And they're related, they're cousins, so they kind of work hand in hand. And as we see kind of like in the beginning of the series, that she really doesn't want to have anything to do with like his other extracurricular activities. She just needs the money, and she's using kind of like this dirty money to kind of clean up the city of Harlem. So it's interesting to also see where her character goes. She kind of goes down this rabbit hole of like intrigue and deception, and it's pretty interesting to see. I wasn't really expecting that from her character. Next we have Claire Temple. Yes, Rosario Dawson. We all know my love for Rosario Dawson. She's the linchpin throughout all of these Marvel Netflix series. We've seen her in Daredevil, we've seen her in Jessica Jones, and now she is back in Luke Cage. And I love the fact that she's back in Luke Cage, and she has a lot more to do. And they kind of take her character in directions that I didn't expect them to kind of take the character of Claire Temple. There's a budding romance between her and Luke Cage, and so that should be interesting to see as these series kind of go along in the Defenders, because we also kind of know about the relationship that he had with Jessica Jones. So I'm interested to see how that relationship kind of plays out in the Defenders when Jessica Jones comes back into the picture. To see if there's going to be like a little love triangle between that. But I enjoyed seeing it in this particular series, and again, just like with Misty Knight, I think Claire Temple has great chemistry with Luke Cage, and I think it definitely worked for this particular series, and I'm interested to see how that plays out moving forward, especially in the Defenders. So let's go ahead and get to Cottonmouth, played brilliantly by Mr. Mahershala Ali. I've talked about this guy before. There is something about him. He has a presence on screen, and he's having a tremendous year. And he is going to be a name that we are going to be hearing a lot about for years to come. And I'm excited to see what else he does after this. I love the way that he's able to kind of strike fear and intimidation into people, but yet have this great charm and swagger to him. It's great, and that laugh and that smile is just every scene. He steals every scene that he's in. It's great to see how he can kind of take that charm and just kind of flip it on a dime and just become so menacing. And I think that is what's so scary about the character of Cottonmouth, and the way Mahershala Ali plays that, especially when he's beating somebody within an inch of his life. It's pretty brutal, but it definitely plays into how we should see this character of Cottonmouth. Something I really also like about the Marvel Netflix shows are how they treat their villains. There's been a lot of complaints within the MCU as far as like they don't really give a lot of character development to their villains, and because they really kind of want to focus on their heroes, and that's a choice that Kevin Feige makes. But I like within the Marvel Netflix universe, with all of their shows thus far, we get a peek behind the curtain of what makes these villains tick. and we've always had an episode dedicated to the villain's backstory, which is something that I personally enjoy. We got that with Kingpin in Daredevil. We got that with the Punisher in Daredevil season 2. We got that with Kilgrave in Jessica Jones, and we get that here with Cottonmouth. And I like the fact that we kind of get to learn a little bit more about our villains, and what it does in these shows is that it gives them a different layer for us to kind of connect with them on a certain level, and it makes it a little bit more complex to understand as an audience member that yeah, these are bad people, but we understand kind of what made them that way, and it's not so black and white or cut and dry. So with Mahershala Ali's character of Cottonmouth, we learn that he is a very creative and artistic person, and he kind of got pushed into this life of crime at an early age. And we also get to learn also Mariah Dillard's part in that, and that she's not as innocent as she may seem. This wasn't necessarily a life that he wanted, and it makes you sympathize with that character, even though everything is kind of, you know, his own will and his own decision to be this crime lord. This was something that was pushed upon him, and again, going back to his performance, he plays it so tragically. It's beautifully tragic, the way those scenes are played out between him and Alfre Woodard. Absolutely loved it. But that actually goes into the death of Cottonmouth, and I have to say this. Before that happens in like episode 7, I believe, I was thinking to myself, like, Cottonmouth is one of these villains that I can kind of see cross over to other series, and they can play the long game with Cottonmouth. And as I say that, literally the next episode, he gets killed. And I think for me, that was the turning point in this series. So the second half of Luke Cage, we get introduced to a character. His name is Eric LaRae Harvey, who plays Willis Diamondback Stryker. So now we finally get introduced to who Diamondback is. This wannabe Tony Todd, Candyman looking motherfucker. I mean, this is kind of where the series kind of goes downhill for me. The way he plays Stryker is very cartoonish. It's very over the top. It's very broad, and it's just not something that I was expecting from this show that was so good up until about halfway through the season, before he got introduced. And then they also bring in to the fact that Diamondback Stryker and Luke Cage are half brothers, and it kind of takes the narrative into a different direction that I necessarily didn't want to see the show go in. Which brings me to another issue that I have, is by connecting these two characters. I understand making them brothers and how you can really like bring out the drama within that, but you also kind of shrink the world by doing something like that. And what I mean by that is the fact that in the beginning of the show, we're introduced to the idea of Diamondback, you know, this ominous arms dealer that we never get to see. But then we're supposed to believe that his half brother Luke Cage is working as a dishwasher, you know, struggling to make money. And to me, it's just kind of hard when you introduce that halfway through the series, that I'm supposed to buy into the fact that these two people are brothers or half brothers. It just feels like that they have all these different narrative threads that don't really connect together. Now I'm all into suspension of disbelief. I mean, I'm definitely a proponent and an advocate of that, especially when a lot of times a lot of people have a lot of criticisms about, you know, why, you know, is this happening, or why. I'm like, sometimes you have to have suspension of disbelief, and believe me, I have that. But within this particular show, it felt like they were really pulling, making it hard for us to believe that, and it was hard for me to buy in to that. And also with the character of Stryker, when he's introduced into the show, he has, I swear to goodness, this dude has like 8 monologues, and they're all like within 3 episodes. I'm like, dude, you talk entirely too much. So much exposition. I understand we need to get some of that backstory, but just the way it was done, I just felt was just, I don't know, it was kind of over the top, and it felt a little bit too forced. And also with the character, he just felt like he just had too many daddy issues. I mean, he was just whining and complaining, and I'm like, dude, look at your life. You're an arms dealer. Yeah, you're not doing great work. You're not helping society by selling Justin Hammer arms to crime lords, but you're doing pretty well for yourself. And for you to have this jealousy towards your half brother who's a dishwasher, like, dude, looks like you ended up on the better end of that. So get over it. But even with that, I think what the second half of the show really was able to do, and what I really appreciated, was that this show is really speaking on the commentary about what's going on in the world today with minorities and with African Americans. And I like the fact that this show was able to kind of tackle that, tackle the idea of profiling, tackle the idea of social injustice, police brutality. And I think that is an important platform to stand on, specifically in a show like Luke Cage, and the timeliness of it for when the show actually came out, with everything that's been going on this year. I feel like you definitely have to make a statement with that. And I love the fact that this show is actually unapologetically black, and it makes no apologies for that, and it's not afraid to be what it is, and it's not trying to be something that it's not. I appreciate the showrunners for taking on that responsibility, because it had to be done. So that I'm truly grateful for, regardless of any shortcomings that the narrative may have, specifically in the second half of this series. I also got to talk about the music. The music is fantastic. If you haven't, go ahead and download the soundtrack. The music, everything is great in this series, and I love the way, especially in the beginning of the series, how they introduce a certain song and how that song kind of plays within a montage of what they're showing within that particular episode. And I remember the creators were saying that they wanted this series to feel like those old school hip hop albums, where you feel like you're listening to a full album from the first track to the 13th track. And nowadays we don't get albums like that. With this new age of digital and iTunes, we'll download certain songs, but we never listened to an album all the way through. And when albums were made back in the 90s, specifically hip hop albums, it was almost like listening to a story. You saw that with like Life After Death, with Ready to Die. Biggie was a great storyteller. Other artists like Wu-Tang Clan, EPMD, Gangstar, Mos Def, all these different guys that I grew up on, like loving hip hop. Like this show pays homage to that era. Of hip hop that we kind of all grew up on, and that was just something I thought was very special to watch. So yeah, guys, I think I pretty much covered everything. I believe I did. If I left some stuff out, just go ahead and tweet at me. We can definitely have some conversations about it. But with a score, I would say up until about the halfway point, this show was like an A+ to me. But because of the second half, how the show kind of petered off at the end, the introduction of Diamondback Stryker as his brother, and the cartoonish nature in which he played him, it just didn't work for me. So it brought it down to about a C minus. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 7.5. I think overall, I still love the show. I love the character. I'm excited to see where the character goes in the Defenders and also in season 2 of Luke Cage. I love what this series actually speaks on in the bigger scope of our world today. And for that, I definitely appreciate it, and I definitely feel like this, to me so far, is probably my favorite of the Netflix series. But yeah, guys, so go ahead and let me know what you think of Luke Cage, if you've seen the whole series, if you like it, if you kind of agree with my opinion of it, or if you don't. So go ahead and rate, comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and go ahead and follow my other dorks at TheDiscoDork, at MouthDork, and at Sidewalk Siren. And go ahead and check out our podcast at ITMOD, and you can find us on iTunes. And for me, I am the Turtle Dork. And with that, I'm out.